The dust had settled around them like a fine golden veil, and in that moment of stillness Margaret felt the weight of every year she had carried. She had been running for 3 days now, her horse finally giving out just as the sun reached its merciless peak, and when she saw the lone tree rising from the desert floor she knew it would be her final resting place. The sound of approaching hooves made her lift her weary head, and through the shimmering heat she saw him, a figure that seemed to emerge from the very landscape itself. His name was Samuel, though she would not learn this for several more minutes, and as he dismounted his horse with the careful movements of a man who had learned to read the desert's moods, she found herself whispering the words that had been circling in her mind like vultures. "It's too late for me." The rancher looked in her eyes and froze. Not from fear or shock, but from recognition of something he had seen reflected in his own mirror during the darkest months after losing his wife Eleanor 3 years prior. It was the look of someone who had given up not on life itself but on the possibility that life might still hold gentleness. Samuel had been riding the perimeter of his land as he did every morning since Eleanor's passing, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of routine when he spotted the figure beneath the old mesquite tree that had served as a landmark for travelers for generations. His ranch stretched for miles in every direction, a testament to 35 years of hard work and careful stewardship, but it had felt hollow since Eleanor's laugh no longer echoed through the kitchen and her garden had grown wild with neglect. The woman beneath the tree was probably 45 or 50, he guessed, though the desert sun and whatever hardships had brought her here made it difficult to tell, and there was something in her posture that spoke of nobility worn thin by circumstance. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat as his father had taught him to do when addressing a lady, "this sun's got teeth today and you look like you could use some shade. That's got water nearby." Margaret studied his face, searching for the calculation she had learned to expect from men, the quick assessment of what she might be worth or what trouble she might bring. Instead she found only concern and something else she had almost forgotten existed: genuine human kindness offered without condition or expectation. "I don't have anything to trade," she said, the words coming out more defensive than she intended. "No money, no skills that would be useful to anyone, no family that would come looking." Samuel crouched down beside her, close enough to offer comfort but far enough to respect her space, and when he spoke his voice carried the gentle authority of someone who had spent years calming frightened animals. "Well now," he said, "I wasn't looking to make a trade, just offering some hospitality to a fellow traveler, and besides I've got more water than I can drink and more shade than I can use." The simplicity of his response broke something loose inside her chest, and she felt tears threatening for the first time in months. "You don't understand," she said. "I'm not a fellow traveler. I'm running from something that can't be outrun, and I'm tired of bringing trouble to good people." Samuel settled himself more comfortably against the tree roots and pulled out a tin cup and a water bottle that had been cooled by the night air. "My Eleanor used to say that trouble's like weather," he said, pouring water slowly so she could see it was clean and fresh. "It comes and goes, but people endure, and the kindness we show each other is what makes the enduring worthwhile." He handed her the cup and waited while she drank, grateful to see color returning to her cheeks. "Name's Samuel," he said, "Samuel Morrison, and I've got a ranch about 5 miles south of here. Been working the same land since I was younger than I care to remember." "Margaret," she said, and the name felt foreign on her lips as if she hadn't spoken it in years. "Margaret Whitfield, though I'm not sure that name means anything good anymore." "Names are just words," Samuel said. "What matters is who we choose to be in each moment, and right now you're someone who needs help and I'm someone who can provide. It seems like a simple equation to me." The afternoon wore on, and with it came Margaret's story, told in pieces like fragments of a shattered mirror that still reflected light even in their brokenness. She had been a schoolteacher in Denver, married to a man who seemed respectable until his gambling debts caught up with them both. When the creditors came looking for payment in forms that had nothing to do with money, she had taken what little she could carry and run, not knowing that her husband had already promised them something far more valuable than cash. "They'll find me eventually," she said as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. "Men like that always do, and when they come I don't want to be the reason good people get hurt." Samuel listened without judgment, his weathered hands wrapped around his own cup of water, and when she finished speaking he was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle high above them. "You know," he said finally, "Eleanor and I never had children, tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be, and after she passed I thought that meant I'd never have anyone to look after again." He gestured toward the vast expanse of his land where cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. But this place is too big for one person and I've been thinking it might be time to hire some help, someone who could handle the books, maybe teach the children of my ranch hands during the slow season. Margaret felt her heart skip a beat but forced herself to remain practical. You don't know anything about me, she said, and what I told you about those men, they're not going to just give up. I know you're educated, Samuel said, can tell by the way you speak, and I know you're honest, could have made up any story, but you told me the truth even when it made you look bad. He stood and brushed the dust from his pants, then extended his hand to help her up. As for those men, well, this is a big country and people who don't want to be found generally aren't, especially when they have friends willing to help them disappear. The ranch house was larger than Margaret had expected, built of adobe and timber with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides and gardens that showed signs of recent neglect but good bones underneath. Samuel's cook Maria had stayed on after Eleanor's death, partly from loyalty and partly because she considered him hopeless when it came to feeding himself properly. She took one look at Margaret and immediately began preparing a bath and a hot meal, speaking in rapid Spanish to Samuel, who nodded and replied in kind. Maria says you're too thin, he translated with a small smile, and that your clothes are suitable for traveling but not for staying, and she wants to know if you have any particular foods you can't eat. I can eat anything, Margaret said, still struggling to believe this was real, and please tell her I can cook and clean and I don't expect charity. Maria responded with a string of Spanish that sounded mildly scolding, and Samuel's smile widened. She says charity is giving money to someone you don't know, but taking care of family is just common sense, and anyone I bring home is family. That first evening Margaret sat on the porch with Samuel, watching the sun paint the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson while Maria bustled around inside, muttering what sounded like criticisms of Samuel's housekeeping. Why are you doing this? Margaret asked. Really, why? Samuel rocked gently in his chair, a habit he'd developed during Eleanor's final illness when sitting still had been the only way to be close to her. You ever notice how kindness works? He said, not the big dramatic gestures but the small daily ones, like offering water to someone who's thirsty or sharing a meal with someone who's hungry. He paused to watch a coyote trot across the distant ridge. Eleanor used to say that kindness was like water in the desert. It doesn't matter where it comes from or why someone offers it, what matters is that it's there when you need it. Over the following weeks Margaret settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and natural. She took over the ranch's books, discovering that Samuel was far better with cattle than he was with numbers, and began teaching the children of the ranch hands in a small schoolroom that had once been Eleanor's sewing room. The work was satisfying in a way she had forgotten was possible, and slowly she began to believe that perhaps it wasn't too late for her after all. Samuel never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but his presence was steady and reassuring, like the mountains that surrounded the valley. He would bring her coffee in the morning when she sat on the porch grading lessons, and would listen when she talked about her students' progress or her ideas for improving the ranch's efficiency. You know, he said one evening as they watched thunderheads building on the horizon, Eleanor would have liked you. She had strong opinions about education, and she always said the best teachers were the ones who had learned something important about life. Margaret felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she thought about the future. What if they find me? She said, what if I bring trouble here after you've been so kind? Samuel was quiet for a moment, watching lightning flicker in the distance. Trouble might come, he said, or it might not, but letting fear of what might happen stop us from living is just another kind of dying. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, brought by a writer who asked no questions and accepted no payment. Margaret recognized her husband's handwriting immediately, and her hands shook as she read the brief message. He had been killed in a card game gone wrong 3 weeks prior, and the men who had been looking for her had moved on to other business. She was free. Samuel found her crying on the porch steps, not from sadness but from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning. It's over, she said, holding the letter out to him. Whatever was chasing me, it's over. He read the letter carefully, then sat down beside her on the steps. How do you feel? He asked. Empty, she said, like I've been holding my breath for so long I forgot how to breathe normally. That'll pass, Samuel said. Fear leaves space behind when it goes, but that space can be filled with better things. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ranch hands go about their morning chores. I could go anywhere now, Margaret said, testing the words. You could, Samuel agreed. I could go back to Denver, find another teaching position, try to rebuild what I had before. If that's what would make you happy. Margaret turned to look at him, really look at his kind weathered face and gentle eyes. What would make you happy? She asked. Samuel smiled, the first truly joyful expression she had seen from him. Having you stay, he said simply, if you wanted to, of course, no pressure, no expectations, just the hope that maybe what we've built here is worth keeping. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, and for the first time in years she felt completely safe. It's not too late then? She asked. For what? For starting over, for being happy, for believing that good things can last. Samuel put his arm around her shoulders and together they watched the sun climb higher into the endless blue sky. Margaret, he said, it's never too late for kindness and everything else just follows from there. 6 months later they were married in a simple ceremony on the ranch with Maria as witness and the mountains as cathedral. Margaret kept teaching and Samuel kept ranching, and together they built something neither could have imagined alone. A life based not on dramatic gestures or passionate declarations but on the daily choice to be kind to each other and to themselves. And when visitors came to the ranch seeking shelter or help, they found it without question, because that's what you do when you understand that kindness, like water in the desert, is precious precisely because it's freely given. The old mesquite tree where they first met became a landmark on the ranch, a place where travelers knew they could find shade and water and perhaps something more valuable than either. A reminder that it's never too late to begin again, and that sometimes the most important journeys start with someone simply offering a cup of water to a stranger in need. Years later, when Margaret would sit beneath that same tree with her students teaching them about literature and life, she would tell them the most important lesson she had ever learned. That kindness offered without expectation of return is the closest thing to magic this world contains, and that it's never too late to choose gentleness over hardness, hope over fear, love over loneliness. The desert that had once seemed like a place to die had become instead a place to discover what living really meant. And in the evening, when the sun painted the sky in colors that had no names, Samuel and Margaret would sit on their porch and watch the stars appear one by one, knowing that they had found something worth more than gold or silver or any treasure the world might offer. They had found each other and learned that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with a journey into the unknown but with the decision to stay and build something beautiful from whatever broken pieces you happen to carry. The ranch prospered under their joint care, becoming known throughout the territory as a place where fair dealing and genuine hospitality could be found. But more than that, it became a testament to the transformative power of choosing kindness even when the world seems determined to reward cruelty. And Margaret never again whispered that it was too late, because she had learned the profound truth that Samuel had tried to tell her from the very beginning. That every morning is a chance to begin again, and every act of kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see or imagine. The woman who had once sat beneath a mesquite tree convinced that her story was ending had discovered instead that sometimes what looks like an ending is really just a comma in a much longer sentence. A sentence written in acts of daily kindness and small moments of grace that add up over time to something approaching wisdom. And in the end, perhaps that's all any of us can hope for: the chance to write our stories with gentleness and to offer others the same patience and understanding we ourselves need to flourish. Because it's never too late to choose kindness, and everything beautiful in this world begins with that simple choice.